Hey guys, welcome back to Beyond the Board. So, season 2 does in fact live. So, today we're not going to talk about a specific pro or shoe. We're going to lead into something a little bit different. We're going to talk about tech boards today. That was something that was very prevalent during the golden era, was tech boards. And today with me, I kind of have a tech board expert next to me. This is Dylan Conrath. And we're gonna segue into something that we both know, but then we're also gonna talk about two particular brands that Dylan was very familiar with. So we all know the basic skateboard, usually 6-ply, maple. Some come from Canada, some are manufactured in China. While during the golden era, we saw a wide variety of tech boards. Particular companies like Element, Black Label, Santa Cruz, Almost, Enjoy, Darkstar.
Pop War.
Pop War, yes. I forgot about Pop War. So Pop War, they had tech boards was that all the big ones that were there?
They were the more successful and well-known ones. Yeah, there were quite a few out there, some from little brands, but I think you covered most of it.
So I actually have a fair amount in the collection, so I'm just going to get right to it. So a lot of them I actually skated back in the day. So this, we're going to start off. So Darkstar, under the Dwindle branch, they actually had the Darkstar 9-ply.
Yeah.
This thing was durable as shit, and honestly, I couldn't break it. I could not break it. Obviously, you can't see, but the plies are starting to separate. I chipped the tail. But for the most part, though, this thing was an indestructible tank. I bought this when I was still working at the bomb shop in Braidwood. I think it was 2006 or 2007. Dwindle was the distributor. That was the big distributor that actually had offered a different amount of technologies as far as their tech boards. So this was one of them. The Darkstar 9-ply. Also, Darkstar They also had the Armor ply.
Yeah.
But didn't they also have an Armor Light?
Yeah, they had an Armor Light that came out later. They also had a revision on the Armor Light that had changed things slightly. So they had quite a few of them.
I'll say, because I know I thought I would always get myself confused with Armor ply, Armor Light, but okay, so I wasn't going crazy. So Darkstar, under the Dwindle brand, like I said, they had the Armor Light, the Armor ply, they had the 9-ply deck. Another Dwindle company, Almost. Actually, we'll go right behind you. So this deck is from 2008. This is when Almost first came out. This was the original double impact board. Now, we were talking earlier. You want to explain to the folks out there the different revisions of the double impact?
Yeah. So this one was actually one of the first ones, and this was my favorite personally. So what they did here is they actually had a full composite top. Which you can see here. This runs tip of the tail all the way to the tip of the nose. It covers the entire thing. This is a layer. So this board is actually only 6 real layers of wood. So they called this a resin 6. And a lot of people forget that resin 6 was even a thing. But they generally sold with resin 7, resin 8, and the rare resin 9 that was just shown. So for this iteration, they went with the impact support discs, and then this top ply. And what I really liked about this one was, you really had support throughout the whole frame, so you didn't have any weird, kind of contorting of the deck.
Yeah.
And in the later revisions, they took these discs that actually come out to here. You can see kind of the faint circle. Kind of turn that in the light so you guys can see it a little better. These discs actually moved up top, and they had them here. Then on another renovation of this, they actually made a strip all the way across. So it was similar to this, but not the whole deck. It was just a strip, and it kind of tapered off right about here and here. And I wasn't as fond of those particular decks. To me, this is the ultimate double impact. I think this was the top of the technology of this branch. I mean, this was great.
Now, why do you think they they decided to change the formula of the double impact throughout the years?
Honestly, pricing. It had to be pricing because this cannot be cheap to produce. You're talking about a deck that has a resin epoxy glue, which for those of you that don't know is not water-based. So the deck is actually a lot more durable to like the elements. It'd be harder to warp one of these decks. It'd be much, much harder to get this waterlogged to the point where it would physically change the deck. If you waterlog a Dwindle distribution deck, even to this day, if you dry it out properly and keep it in a microclimate, it will be all right. It will actually dry out just fine, and it'll still skate well. It won't be the same, but it'll be, minorly changed. Where if you took just your standard water-based glue deck and you ran that out, let's just say a Baker, for instance, the deck would never feel the same. It would feel terrible. So mix that technology with this, and you got something really, really sound. The downside, once again, is that cost. You're talking about a lot of money here. You got to bond these discs, bond a whole top layer, and hope that there's no glitch in manufacturing, or whatever this cost just went out the window. So they probably, if I had to estimate, I'd probably say out of 10 of these made, 1 or 2 were defective.
So about an 80% chance, or 80%, 80-20, getting a good batch of a good batch, bad batch.
Yeah, and I could be wildly off. Dwindle does have their stuff down to a science, but yeah, this particular deck, I could not imagine that this was easy to create, especially from a traditional wood manufacturer. But as far as tech decks went, I think Dwindle had the best run. I really do. They were successful in most of their ventures.
Now, going into another almost technology, this isn't. I guess you can say kind of an experimental board in a sense. So this is the Rodney Mullen Uberlight deck. If it's one of, do they still? I think they still do make them.
They still have them.
They're still
They're in
what,
CCS.
120 bucks I think for the deck.
Yeah, 120, 130 actually. I saw it in CCS yesterday. I got a CCS to my house.
So did I. Because I ordered a hoodie. I ordered a green hoodie a while back with the old school logo, and I got one. I was like, yo, when I got that CCS mail, I kind of felt like a kid again.
Yeah, same. And it was a complete surprise to me. I don't actually know who ordered it, so if you're out there watching this, thank you for sending me CCS. I don't know if it's a family member or a friend, but for sending me Thrasher as well as CCS, thank you.
So this is probably one of the lighter decks out today. Now, if I remember correctly, so similar to the double impact, it's got that foam core going around the middle of the board, correct?
Yeah, it's a building support foam. It's kind of the same thing that you'd find in structural design. So, like, let's say there's actually, I hate to use this reference, but if you look into the videos of the Twin Towers, they had that foam that was supporting the floors, and it caved under the heat of the jet fuel. It's kind of similar to that.
Okay.
And it made it really rigid. The biggest complaint with that deck was it was too stiff, and it was a masterpiece of the time and still is today. It's timeless. The only downside to it is it's not chip resistant, and really, it's still wood. So you're going to have the same type of wear and tear as a normal board, just less chance of truly breaking it.
Now, is it similar to the double impact, where it's going to the reinforcement is extremely strong in the center with that foam?
Yeah, but it does spread. It actually, so the illustration here is almost accurate.
Okay.
It's almost accurate. If you were to chop this down, so they show here a tiny illustration you guys might be able to see. This shows that the foam goes from here to here. It's not actually correct. It's actually squared off here.
Okay.
It comes through about right here. And I believe there's a chamber here where there's a few layer gap that they originally injected that into. They sandwiched the deck together. They let it cure. This is still an epoxy resin board, so the layers are actually held together by that resin epoxy Dwindle's known for. But altogether, it yielded at the time a much lighter deck that was pretty stiff. I mean, this thing really doesn't like to give. I'm sitting here twisting it in my hands, and it's still rigid. And I mean, this one, how old is this?
I think that's a 2016 or 2017.
Okay, so this isn't that old, but still, by wood standards, a normal deck at this type of age would have developed stress cracks, just little stuff like that. The resin epoxy, not being water-based, it doesn't really change as much as a normal deck would when exposed to moisture and just humidity in the air. So, I mean, that shows true here. We got no stress cracks from a board from 2016, 5 years later. And, I mean, this would be good to go out and skate. You could actually bolt this up and go skate it.
I do have. So what's funny is I actually have another one of these, and it's got the matching old school tensors with the slider piece. They're the Uber. They're the Uber Light tensors with, I think they came with a hollow axle.
Yeah.
So it's the matching tensors to go with this. I think I got for like $100 on eBay. Let's see. Oh, and then now you reference Popware. Now, when they had their tech deck, was that when they were under the Dwindle brand? Or was that when they were by themselves first?
No, that was, God, what were they called? Giant Distribution or Stereo?
I think, yeah, Giant Distribution, I think, has Stereo.
Yeah, it was Giant Distribution. So Giant Distribution started messing around with technology a little bit.
Okay.
And one of the things they came up with was this teardrop that spread over the bolts, and then it would move back towards the tail section, and it would go to a point at the tail. It literally looked like a teardrop. They called it the Popware Technical Drop. And it was an amazing deck for people that were flipping their boards, because that's when we were at the height of flip tricks. You know, we were really starting to throw triple flips and some pretty wild variations. And I think it really made an impact at the time, because what was special about that is there wasn't an extra cost. You know, that was the price of a normal deck.
Yeah. Now, I remember when I used to work at the bomb shop in Braidwood. Later, when Popware did move to Dwindle, I thought I saw that they kept the same tech. They were somehow able to take the tech from Giant to Dwindle and still keep that.
You might be right. I wouldn't know much about it, because Popware was fading heavily in my area, so I don't have as much knowledge of them. But what I do know is their deck's performance was very, very good for the time, and I think it could still hold up today. I think if there was let's say a person out there that were to reissue a technical drop type deck, I think it would hold up fairly well, especially at the standardized pricing.
That wasn't Popware. That was what Kyra Foster's brand, wasn't it?
Yes, okay. It was.
Because I remember seeing it was green with the big Popware, the rabbit head. It was all it was gold, and it had the teardrop.
Yeah.
And it was Kyra Foster, but it came with all like the packaging from Dwindle.
Yeah.
So I guess I remember it moving to Dwindle before it faded out.
Yeah.
Now, going from the non-Dwindle brands, probably one of the most successful tech boards out there was the Element Fiberlight.
I agree with you 100%. That was an amazing deck.
Now, the Element Fiberlight, I know a little bit about the tech, but I know we were talking earlier. So what was big about the Fiberlight?
So it had a fiber composite core, and this actually spreads from here. It's also square.
Okay.
It spreads from here to here. It's actually way thinner.
Oh.
It's only about this wide. It's about 2 inches, maybe 2.5 inches across. It's not as big as your truck here.
Okay, the base plate of the truck.
But it goes right underneath the bolt hole. So it's literally inside those bolt holes, and it stretches the whole length of the deck. It literally looks like black fiberglass, but it's like a composite fiberglass. And it really did strengthen the deck. Once again, I think what made these guys successful, same with the other deck we were just looking at, they sold this at a regular price. This was just your standard deck.
No.
But just a lot stronger.
The sister technical deck, the Helium, did they sell that at the same price? Did they sell at the same cost too, or was that up a little bit more?
So the Helium, in certain markets, had a small markup once it became popular. When Professor Schmidt invented that technology, what he did was he took the wood and he rippled it to where it had a wave in it, right? And he made 5 air chambers. But because that ripple, it's harder. Like, think if you take a newspaper, and you just take it, it's flat, and you just bend it. It's not very hard, right?
Yeah.
But if you roll the newspaper and then you try to bend it, it's now much harder to bend. It was kind of the same philosophy there. So those little waves, I believe there were 5 air chambers. He did do an experimental one he never released to the public that had 3. But when he had the 5 air chambers, they were hollowed out chambers about 4 layers deep into the deck, 2 layers in the bottom, 2 on the top. The 3 in the middle were hollowed out, and it would just wave, right? And there was just a small wave in each 5 of those chambers that really held the structural integrity of the deck. Downside for me was that deck became very flexible in its later life, but that Helium, although super light and feeling almost flimsy, it was really strong. I never had a problem out of a Helium.
I remember seeing one of my homies, to Titus, was a very diehard BAM element user, and I remember him skating the Fiberlight and the Helium decks. And speaking of Fiberlight and Helium, they actually they took that Helium technology and made it into their wheels.
Yeah.
Now, with those wheels, they were hollow, correct? They were hollow side cuts.
Yeah, so they were a side cut design, and the ultimate feature of it was the core of it was plastic with a hollowed out chamber and some holes in it too.
Okay.
So I mean, it was basically, if you think about a rim on a car, imagine that rim was plastic, right? That's kind of how this was. The Spitfire Firelit LTD Classic.
Wasn't that your first wheel?
That was my first wheel. That was very similar in the way that it performed, but it was light. Downside, you could break a core, especially where we are in Illinois.
I was going to say, not only with the susceptibility of the weather in Illinois, but just hitting something huge in the drop.
Yeah. There's actually a clip of a skater. It's not the one of I know everyone's going to go to Aaron Jaws Hamoki. Everyone's going to go to that clip and think it's this one. This is not the clip I'm referencing. There's a clip of a guy on Element, and he blasts over a railing. He lands on the ground, and his wheel gets torn off. And it's actually the core had exploded, which broke his bearings, and he's rolling away on 1.5 bearing. Like, the bearing sideways, the balls are shooting everywhere. Jesus. And he's on one bearing just rolling away, and he slides out sideways and falls off the deck. Yeah, it's very similar to the Jaws clip that Jaws later did, but in Jaws' case, that was a standardized wheel. It actually split the wheel and ripped it in half. So his actually completely ripped off, where the Element clip, he was on the Featherlight wheel, the core shattered, and took the bearing with it. Yeah, it took the inner bearing, ripped it sideways, and the outer one was he rolling away.
That is nuts. Yeah, I'll be honest. So I was able to snag this on a Crackhead special. Like I usually do most of the stuff. So what's cool about this is not only I can see there's a lot of meat left on this tail. So I mean, if I wanted to, it's still skatable. But on top of it, really, it's gently used. It's definitely a classic Fiberlight BAM board, but BAM Signature Destructos. The resale market on these is ridiculous. Like the pink ones, like any BAM truck, for whatever reason, the resale market is nuts. And I think, yeah, these are vintage Dark Stars.
Are they?
This is, I think, also is the Master Urethane.
God, I love that compound.
Yeah, so that's vintage Dark Star with the good urethane, not the urethane that they're using today.
Yeah, which if anyone's listening to this and liked the Master Urethane and wants to return to that, the current person using the Master Urethane is in charge of Rec Wheels, and Rec Wheels is using that formula. I'm not a fan of Rec Wheels, but that wheel is phenomenal.
Now, another technology deck, I know you said you didn't like in particular, and it was shared by two different brands. It was Flip and Plan B for... Were they under the same distribution at the time?
Yes.
I was to say, because there had to be a reason. And this is the Bob Burnquist P2 deck from when he left, when the firm went debunked, and him and Lance Mountain went over to Flip. Now, you said you skated one of these, and you didn't like the P2 technology.
Yeah, I hated it. So my problem with the deck was this. As I was skating, I can't remember much about this deck. I hated it that much. I think this is just someone painting on it. I don't remember if there was carbon on top or what the deal was with this deck. What I do remember is this. This deck was incredibly flexible from the day I bought it. It would not break on me, like not from skating. I did stomp it. But as far as actually skating it, it was very flexible, felt very flimsy from day one, and it drove me insane. Also, Louis Lopez, I don't know what he has going on with the shape. It works for him. He's a phenomenal skater. That shape does not work for me. But yeah, I remember it was super flexible. And even this one. So if you guys are watching this, you can see I'm just twisting the deck very easily. Not even really trying too hard.
Wait a minute, hold on.
Yeah. Go ahead, flex it in your hands. Yeah, just twist it. You see what I mean? And that's a relatively new one. Yeah.
That's kind of alarming.
Yeah, and I was light at the time. I was about 150 pounds. I know this doesn't look like much right here, but I'm actually 6'2", so 150 pounds is pretty light for my size.
The concept behind the P2, isn't it like it's essentially like a spring? Like it was supposed to give you, it was supposed to create some sort of spring effect to give you more pop on your ollie.
Yeah, something like that. And then they were also pushing that it was stronger and more resilient to like breakage from lip slides and stuff. Because at that time, a lot of people were having problems. They'd go to do a lip slide, the board would just snap or pop a few top layers.
Now, as far as was there something in the middle of the deck too?
Like I said, I don't remember much about this deck. I think it was something to do with the top ply. We could grab a razor and peel the grip.
Yeah, I might end up de-gripping this later on, but
yeah, because I am curious. I forgot what it was that made the P2 so special, but I actually bought mine from Jarek's Skateboard Shop, one of the sponsors of this channel.
I remember seeing a couple of them at the a couple Plan B what do they call it? A couple Plan B P2s at the old Jarek's in Plainfield. Now, another particular one that was short-lived, but we'll file it under seemed like a good idea at the time, is the New Wave technology.
Oh,
Do I
boy.
have one on here? I know I've got that one. So, here we go. Actually, so here's another, oddly enough, the Firm. So at the time when the New Wave came out, it was Blitz Distribution came out with the technology. So it was Birdhouse, which Birdhouse was the only brand under that umbrella that didn't use it. It was Flip, the Firm, and at the time Baker and Bootleg were all under Blitz. And so the concept behind the New Wave again is, I don't feel if you can see how it looks like kind of like literally a wave. And I understood why they did that. Again, less surface area on a board slide, not as much catching on your surface, but within those waves, those peaks, I guess you could say there was valleys.
Yeah.
And so this deck right here, the Burnquist Pilot Head deck, I actually bought one and skated it from the original Jarek's in Jefferson Street. And that's what happened was, it was a solid board until one day I just started getting a stress. It was just a small crack. I didn't think nothing of it. I'm like, oh, okay, it's just typical. And that's how I ended up breaking it. I think I was trying to board slide something, or I was trying to slide a small curb that we had waxed up, and it just, and it was kind of disappointing because I was like, oh, cool, this is a tech board. It's supposed to be stronger. Oh, and fun fact, so this New Wave just wasn't on the bottom. I don't know if you could see the grip tape or whatnot, but it actually waved on the top too. So even though those peaks and valleys are very small, it actually took a little bit getting used to when I first stepped on it, because you were so, usually when all boards are always flat on top, and when you first felt it, actually run your hand across the grip real quick.
Yeah, I actually had one of these as well. I had a similar experience to him, but I had a different problem with this deck specifically. So I usually skated very flat decks back then. And one issue that I would run into with this is the accuracy of my flip was drastically off because at the time I was really into suede shoes. And what would happen is I would either catch on one of these rivets and it would just throw my board randomly, or I would go to release the board, like I'd go to release like a hard flip or something, and my shoe would start skipping across the deck, and you could see it. If you're wearing a white set of shoes, you could see...
Almost like dots in a sense?
Yeah, kind of like a scuff mark that's hopping, right? Like you get with a really high-shaped deck if you hard flip a really steep deck. Yeah, so I was getting this kind of peck mark going up and down the deck. Let's see if I can find one from the previous owner. No, I can't. Yeah, so... It would hop across here, which made it really inconsistent. And then the other problem I had was the breakage. So mine actually broke on the top ply, and it started just like yours with this weird stress crack that went in a perfectly straight line.
Yeah.
It met here, and keep in mind the deck was only a week old. It was a week old. And then I landed hard on the tail, and it popped up here all the way to like here and went out jagged from landing on the tail, which I had never seen before. It was a really weird break.
That's an odd break.
Yeah, it was a really weird break, and the truck kind of came through diagonally, like here, kind of came through. So very weird break, kind of turned me off on this type of board. But for what they were trying to do, I understand why they did it. What I would like to see is this technology reemerge, but differently. I would like this wave just on the bottom, and I'd like to see this as an Everslick.
Ooh.
Yeah. Because I feel like if they conquer the problem of the top ply,
Yeah.
skipping your foot across, and then they simply do an Everslick, you got a riveted deck. It's kind of like riding rails.
Yeah.
And then you have the Everslick technology. You have the perfect concrete sliding board. You forget your bar of wax, no problem. Clear coat the curb once a month, and you're good.
You know what though? So let's look at it from. I just thought of this idea. So obviously, you can see I have a lot of Bob Burnquist decks. Do you think this technology actually would have fared decent on the vert ramp compared to, say, skating street or park?
I have minimal knowledge when it comes to vert, but for what my thought process would be on it is it's less resistance when you're sliding. The guys on transition, they're going pretty high speed. I feel like a stick would be catastrophic for them in most cases. So yeah, I could potentially see it helping, but then again, I've also never seen a transition or vert skater actively go after an Everslick. So, yeah, it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag with me.
So, like I said, the Flip had it. You could see some of the New Waves boards on Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 if you play through. Like I said, it was the Firm, Baker, Bootleg, and then Birdhouse kind of did their own thing with the Birdhouse. They called it the Black 6 series.
Yeah, there's a 6-ply, right?
Yeah, it was a 6-ply.
Cold press.
Yeah, it was a 6-ply cold press. They were the only one that did something different under the Blitz banner. Now, there's two boards that I don't have in my collection, but I do want to talk about real quick. I actually skated one, and one was the Black Label Power Beam.
Oh, I love Black Label.
And what sucks is I remember the graphic verbatim. So it was blue, and it was a crash test dummy. I literally snapped it in 2 weeks.
Brutal.
So if you guys are familiar with the Braidwood Park, there's just the small, I'm not even call it mini, it's a small micro spine.
Yeah.
And so what I used to love doing is just like oweling off and just catching fucking mad air. And I was hitting them clean all day, and all of a sudden I landed right in the bolts, and there were some witnesses. Robbie Angon was there, Titus was there, and and they both just looked at me like, you just bought that 2 weeks ago. And they both saw that I landed clean. Like, I caught hella air, but I landed clean on the bolts, and you just hear a snap, and they looked at me, and then Tim just starts dying, and he's like, you just bought that deck too. I'm like, I wasn't happy. But my boss at the time, Big Rob, was like, you know what? You bought that deck 2 weeks ago, just go ahead and grab another one off the shelf, call it even. I'm like, hey, all right, perks of working at a skate shop.
Good boss.
Right? And I never skated one, but Titus skated it, and it was the Black Label Power Ply.
Yeah, the Power Ply.
Believe it or not, he was skating that was a 7.5 he was skating. And it was a 7.5 he was skating with 7.5 tensors with the sliders on them. And I remember that deck actually lasted a while before it snapped.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of tech boards, an old school tech board, there is a particular brand that hits close home to you.
Yeah, there's a couple of them, but pull out the first one.
Pull out the first one. Pull out the first tech board that...
So, I was luckily enough to be involved with this company when I was a little younger, and we'll get into that more in my episode in the future. But for now, we're going to talk about this. This is a Revolution skateboard deck, and this was kind of the height of technology in the early 2000s. This company was kind of the first to put their foot down and say, let's go for broke, let's make the best board possible. This board is 960 grams. And to put that in perspective, your average wood deck is about 12 to 1300 grams. If you like to skate reels, you'll notice reels are a little bit heavier. They're about 1250 to 13. This is 950. This is also by design perfectly balanced. So you can actually set it there and it'll just balance.
So you and I were talking earlier before we started filming that this is considered one of the lightest decks today.
Yeah.
And when I held this and then I held that, like if I'm going to do a scale.
Yeah.
The Rev deck, light years lighter than this Uberlight. And this Uberlight, like I said, this Uberlight's got foam. So foam is not heavy. This
Yeah. So the secret here, they were using graphite rods in the board to keep it structurally sound. Now this carbon fiber, this isn't going to show up on the camera too well, but this carbon fiber is paper thin. And Danny, I just want you to put your fingers together. Now tap your top finger. Yeah.
Good Lord.
Yeah, so that's paper thin. But, the structural integrity of the deck was very, very good. Unfortunately, what ended up happening to this company is they ran into this problem where their decks were so strong, it was kind of like landing on steel. It was very hard, very rigid, there was no give, but they would not break. They would traditionally wear down to a point where the carbon was starting to get through, and then this part would kind of chip away and break, and then it was just dangerous to skate. It would literally cut you if you grabbed the board. So,
well, at least if you had a shank if you needed it in a oh shit time.
Yeah, never figured out if it was bulletproof, but the problem they came into is at one point the owner of the company decided to appeal to the younger market because there were a lot of kids that broke boards, but they were very light. They're landing on this thing, it's like a piece of steel. So he tried out an experiment to see if he could make it more flexible, and in testing, it worked. But when it came into the real world, when he actually started pushing them as the new version of this deck, what happened is the deck not only would flex, but in colder climates, it would break. And this was a $220 deck at the time. So when you sell someone a $220 deck and it breaks, even though it's defective, and RevDeck was good to their word, they would ship you another one, no questions asked. They would even pay for your shipping. 9 times out of 10, you still lost that customer for life. So,
well, yeah, because you talk that big game as a brand, and then even though yes, you're getting comped for the defective board, it leaves like a sour taste in your mouth as not just a skateboarder but a consumer of skate products.
Yeah, and so there's a couple more features I do want to talk about before we move on with this one. So the other two things to note about this deck, other than it being light and perfectly balanced, which is huge for pro skateboarders, the other thing was the pop on this was explosive. The graphite rods really didn't give much, but the little give they gave, they would return with a tremendous amount of energy. You could ollie onto picnic tables with this, no problem. You're easily getting 6-8 more inches of height out of this deck. You could blast this thing off the ground.
So would you almost say that what that did, they were the P2 before the P2 tried to think that they could essentially do that with that almost like diving board.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And this is the absolute height of technology in their time period. This is the Ferrari of boards at that time, and they really put every bit of tech in possible. So the reason that these grooves are here like this is because some of their team, in fact, most of their team was actually vert skaters. And this is a place where you can grab the board. So is here. You're grabbing your board, you're coming up, boom, you grab it here. You got a place to hold it, you can throw it back down, right? So that was part of the innovation. The other part of the innovation was these pockets right here actually doubled as a wheel well. So
no wheel bite.
Yeah,
that's pretty ingenious. That the fact that it's got the dual usage, like you said, for the vert riders, it's easy to grab for like Christ stairs, finger flip air walks. If you're doing 360 varials, and especially if you're riding vert because you're going so damn fast and riding almost like a 10-foot vert wall, you don't want that. You don't want that wheel bite because that's just a bad day.
Yeah, this is clearly a used deck, but if you look, you can see no wheel bite marks on it. The reason for that is at this time, people were mostly on street riding classic wheels. A classic wheel is a small contact patch. So as the truck would dip, truck when it dips, it doesn't dip straight down. It actually dips diagonally backwards, right? Or it raises diagonally forwards. So as it would dip into this pocket right here. And I remember, as long as you were riding the correct size truck for your board, which is actually supposed to be slightly shorter than the actual edge of your board.
Are you talking about for this deck or decks in general?
For this deck.
Okay.
For this deck. On street.
Okay.
On vert, you would ride a conical and it would totally screw it up. But Yeah, as you're riding it, it would dip into this pocket, and you would not hit wheel bite with this deck. So tremendous innovation. Unfortunately, that defective batch did put them under. I was very unhappy to see them go in 2014, and you guys are missed heavily. This was an amazing deck, but as all things, got to move on.
And that sucks because if you think about it, an average skater probably goes through what, 3-4 decks a year?
Yeah.
So we'll just say $60 a pop. 6, 12, 18, $240 for 4 decks an entire year. You said those were what, 220?
This was 220. At the time that I started skating them, I was going through a deck every 3 days. A really strong deck, like let's say a Watson laminate or a Woodchuck laminate creation, something like a Black Label, that would last me a week, sometimes 2 if I wasn't skating stairs that week. So this deck would actually last me a good 4, 5, even 6 months, and I wouldn't retire them from breaking them. I would retire them from the tail wear,
the shank,
being
in a sense.
so bad that
Okay.
it would become dangerous. So that's normally what I did. Sometimes I would throw it out to the crowd and let them try to stomp it or whatever. But and I still do those shenanigans too, but not with this one.
That is definitely going on the wall.
Yeah.
Now, going from old to new tech. A brand that you have, in my opinion, have definitely started to become extremely familiar with.
So this is a company I currently work with, and they're called Capsule Skateboards. I work with Pitbull Skateboards for wood decks, and then I work with Capsule Skateboards for indestructible decks. And I do mean that. If you want to challenge me on it, let me know. This will be in my car. I will let you run it over, stomp it, or hit it with something. That is an open challenge. This deck is indestructible. You could cut it in half with a saw, but that's not what skateboarding is. If you're landing on this deck, you're coming downstairs, you're doing whatever, this board will not fail you. There's a lot of pluses to this deck, a couple minuses, and a lot of innovation here. So, for the record, these 2 decks just touched on the table. That's the first time in history that these 2 decks have even been in the same room, let alone touched.
So would you essentially say that Revolution, by even did so? Let me ask you this: Did Capsule know about Revolution?
They had heard about Revolution.
So could you say this was the big? This is the big brother to Capsule in an unofficial sense.
Yes and no. Yes and no. Did they go after the same idea, build the best board possible? Yes. Who did it better? Who did it worse? Who did what right? Who did what wrong? That's all debatable. What I see out of it is innovation.
Yeah.
You have the best of the early 2000s. You have the best of the current generation. Unfortunately, they're not in the same time period. I wish they were. But they are not. This deck's got a lot of features that this one did not.
Okay.
This deck has a lot of features that this one does not. So
Mashup. There needs to be a mashup.
yeah, there are
Because here's the thing: is since Revolution is no longer a thing, that proprietary is probably up for grabs, isn't it?
It might be. It might be. The owner of the company was named David.
Okay.
I did call and ask him to bring this company back when I saw the boom coming with skateboarding. I did actively call David. I did try to get him to bring it back. I literally begged. He would not do it. 2 things holding him back. One, he's no longer interested. He had a bad experience with, trying to be in the industry and then having it collapse upon him, as any businessman would have if their company went under. Especially by flukes like, the market going under a little bit, as well as a defective batch. It left a bad taste in his mouth, along with working with certain people on his team. It was difficult for him. He put a lot of heart and soul and money into it, as well as hundreds of hours of R&D, and he got nothing in return. So he sold the machines that would let him make this board.
That sucks.
There's really no return path.
Yeah.
And if he even tried to return to this, I would estimate $100,000 at least.
Just to get the startup?
Just to build one of these. He would have to buy all the machines back, get all the materials, reach out to companies that are no longer making some of these materials, and try to get this remanufactured. Also, a fun fact about this board real quick before we move on. This is number 891124. So this is the 89,000 whatever of the black, of the solid black design. So that tells you how well they were selling. But moving on to the Capsule. So this brand is available today. You can go buy these. These are $120. Capsule is a brand from Cyprus, which is a small island in the Mediterranean Sea. It's technically a UK territory. These guys are great to work with. They're a phenomenal company, and their board is even better. This is a lot of research and development.
Okay.
And what they've yielded here is a deck that's comparable to your average deck. It's about, I want to say it's about 1,300 grams.
Okay.
It varies based on size. But they really do have a super strong deck, and there are some special features here. So let's get into it a little bit. So if I roll it over, you're going to notice that the nose is square. That is not a fluke. That is a signature thing. They did this because this board has woven plastic on the bottom. So as you're going to scoop down on a traditional board, you'll get that nice feedback and that pop, and you'll get a good flick out of it, right? Well, on this board, you're on plastic. If you push the nose down, it can slip left or right if you're only touching a little hair.
Oh, so more surface area to create that. That's, I guess you could say, that secure feeling of
that secure feeling of a perfect nollie, fakie, whatever flip, right? It also is a different tool in your arsenal because these are not identically shaped, because they're not even close to the same shape. You don't have to use this on your approach. There are certain tricks that this nose is going to work better for, So this is just another tool in your arsenal to use while you're out there. This board is indestructible, as I said, and the features of it with it being woven plastic is it doesn't lose its shape. It doesn't change shape or warp ever.
Which is huge in the Midwest because of the changing of the seasons, especially, our wet springs, our wet falls in the spring. It's not, and especially our extremely cold and wet winters that we have here.
Yeah. Some of the other features of it, too. So because it is a woven plastic, this is the equivalent of like an Everslick. It slides. It slides on concrete. It slides on steel. It slides on skate parks. It slides outside. This thing is great to slide on. It's obviously very good for impact. I have a video actually of one of my skaters, Jack, just trying to break this on a lip slide. He's purposely stomping down as hard as possible, and the board goes like this in the video. And Danny, I'll get that clip over to you,
okay,
so you can actually.
Okay, yeah. We'll I'll put in that.
Yeah, but it flexes like to here. He lands, and it's perfectly fine. And it's this deck. It is this actual deck right here that I'm holding. This deck has been run over by a car. It's been stomped by probably 30, 40 people, including myself. And it's still here 3 months later, and I'm still actively skating this deck. This will be in my car, and if you ask to stomp my deck this week, this is the deck you will probably stomp. So, yeah, pretty amazing deck, and a lot of tech, a lot of springboard effect out of the pop, a lot of similarities, but want to get into the differences a little bit?
Let's go.
So, here's some things I just noticed, and these are more or less time period things.
Okay.
That have come in and out of fad. So with the Rev deck, you got a place to grab, right?
Yeah.
Well, as we know, early 2000s, Vert was still every bit as hot as Street, but Street was coming up, right? You fast forward to 2021, and Street is king.
Street, and it sucks because, especially there is a lot of great Vert battles. One of them being Lassick versus Burnquist 2001 X Games Finals. Like that was, you had that, and then another classic was Team Huck Jam versus the Killer Bees, Bucky and Bob. And it sucks that you don't have that today. Like you're saying, during the golden era, it was almost like Street was king, but also Vert was king. And like how you're saying, like trends. Like obviously Vert's still around, and obviously with the mega ramp with Elliot Sloan still filming clips, and Bob will do something every now and then, and Danny will do something every now and then. But it seems like the scale is definitely gone. Vert is here, and like you were saying, street is king.
Yeah, and it's just accessibility. Not every town has a vert ramp, but every single town has streets.
Exactly.
So
every town's got a small bank with a mani pad or a small ledge you can wax up, or every town's got some sort of stair set with a handrail. Or let's face it, every town is a skate park. They just don't know it.
Yeah. But so some more differences. Getting a little off track here. So if you look at the wheelbases of the deck, you'll notice that the rev deck, its wheelbase stops right here. You got about a good 2-3 fingers of flat here, and then your nose will start to curve up, right? So that's, well, actually this is the nose, but you got the same thing over here.
Got about 2 fingers wide.
Your tail's gonna have 2.5, about 2 and a pinky. Yeah. Where that was for a technical type of skating back then, you would want a longer side of the lever to propel your board into the air. And if we move over to the capsule, you'll notice that that's only the case on the nose. On the tail here, we have 1 finger of flat and an immediate scoop up.
The concave will start. No shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you'll notice there's also aggressively rolled pockets, where they were a lot less pronounced back in the early 2000s. So you look at the shape of this deck on top of the rev deck, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And you look at that, Danny, you see that the shapes are drastically different.
It's like night and day between the two high-tech decks.
Yeah, and part of that comes into their technology and how they actually work to generate force. So with the capsule, you are legitimately getting a springboard effect. One of the special features of this board I forgot to mention earlier, and I definitely have to go over this. The tail, when you flex it, the core of a board always rises. If you watch yourself do a 360 flip, a kick flip, you'll notice your tail comes down, your core lifts up, you release the weight, and then the board goes back to traditional shape as it flips, right? It then flexes again upon landing. Well, with this deck, when you do that, the core rises a lot, giving you a spring-loaded effect.
Okay.
But that's doubled by the fact that because this reaction happens so quickly, this board being an 83875, this board flips like an 8.0. Even though I already
though it's a boat,
yeah,
it flips like an 8.
It's heavy and it's big, but this flips like a lightweight board. And one of the key things I tell people when they try out this board is do a 360 flip if you can. Yeah, okay. Now can you put in less effort? Give me 20% less effort. Don't even try. And they'll pop it and it'll just work. And the reason is because this flips so fast that if you're trying to over crank it, you're going to blast it up into yourself. Where if you just loft it a little bit, the springboard effect will kick in and it'll just whip around for you.
Damn.
Yeah. There was another special feature to this thing I was supposed to mention. Oh yeah, soft landing. So because this deck is able to flex to a degree that no other deck can, it provides a very soft landing feel. So if you're going down an 8 stair, it's going to feel like maybe a 5.
Damn.
And it's very mellow on the landing. So big impact, this thing absorbs it for you.
And on top of that, it's going to prevent less injuries for you, to where your joints will be able to take it. It will be able to, I guess, to take the abuse more, and not only that, but worry about blowing out a knee.
And I've actually had some knee damage, and I ride this board over the Pitbull boards that I get in, simply because this one doesn't hurt my front knee. My front knee is really bad, and if I'm on a wood board for more than an hour, I get a surging pain. With this board, I can skate all night, and I'll be lightly achy the next morning. So very good for older skaters, highly recommended. Back to the rev deck and the difference. This thing was like landing on a piece of steel. This thing probably directly resulted in some of my knee damage, but then again, this is skateboarding. It's mostly my fault.
I'll say we know what happens when we step on that board. We assume the liability, and well, sometimes shit happens.
Yeah. And while we're talking about that, for anyone listening to this, if you ever have someone say that they don't want you skating here because they could get sued, skateboarding was ruled a self-assessed risk by the U.S. Supreme Court a long, long time ago. You cannot sue anyone if you break your arm on their property. So use that the next time they pull out that line on you.
I learn something new every day.
Yeah. So it's been fun, Danny.
I know. It's been fun because, you know, I guess you could say we have seen an evolution from the golden era till now, starting off with, like I said, some of the things that I pulled out from the collection to what you being familiar with Rev, and obviously you being familiar with Capsule. Like I said, just talking about the average cost, $240 for 4 decks, $120 one deck, and like I said, it's pretty cool that, like, I have a knee problem, you've got a knee problem, and the fact that Capsule board is almost like, almost in a sense of, like, I compare it to having like a car with really good shocks.
I would call it a prosthetic because so when you look at a prosthetic and a skateboard, they're very similar.
Okay.
Neither one are perfect, and both of them are an extension of your body, right?
Yeah.
You use this as an extension of your body. But the problem people with prosthetic limbs and prosthetic legs run into is they're not quite as good as the real thing, right? Well, this is not the real thing. This is not wood, but this is better. It really is. And this is $120. And I'm not saying that because I work here. I have full transparency.
Yeah.
Anyone that knows me knows I'm 100% transparent. I mean, I admitted here on camera today, this board's lighter than this one. But what I can say is, as far as my knee damage went, this is the only reason I'm able to, skate as much as I do and have fun and hang out with the kids and stuff. It's kept me on it, and it's given me a little motivation to maybe try some tricks outside my comfort zone again. I'm really liking it, and
now you've got my gears turning because of my knee, and I might have to try one out and see how my knee feels. I'm not skating an 838 though. Hell no, I'm skating an 8. I guess I tried skating these big boats. The only good thing they're good for is cruising, and when I hit the GoPro and start filming.
Yeah.
But I probably would like to try a Capsule 8.0 just to see how my knee feels, and if for some odd reason that is like somewhat the difference of, like, I don't feel like I'm not excruciating that night. That little extra motivation could be, let's go skate every day, and I ain't gonna have that sharp pain in my knee.
Yeah. Before we close up, I want to talk about a board company that's not currently present, and just give a little public warning. There's a company called Lithe Skateboards, as made famous by Braille. They have an amazing team. They have an amazing guy behind the project. Unfortunately, with Braille blowing them up and getting their exposure level 10 times higher than they were ready for, they had to outsource. And when they outsourced, their wait time to get a board manufactured became so long that a couple of my skaters that ordered one before I partnered with Capsule, they have now been waiting over a year on their Slate 3 deck from Lithe.
Jesus.
So this is a public warning. If you order a Lithe, be prepared for a heavy wait. They are incredible decks. Their technology does work. They are stronger than wood, but you could potentially not be a skateboarder anymore by the time it reaches your door. You might, if you're 27 now, you might be 31 when your board arrives on your doorstep, because they're over a year and a half out now, and the pandemic is getting worse as far as production goes.
And there's always options.
Yeah, there are some options. I mean,
so if people are interested or even just want to check out Capsule, like, where can they go? Like, kind of start going down the rabbit hole with Capsule.
So you could do it the old school way. You could go to the Capsule website.
Okay.
I have some stickers in the car I forgot to bring up for you.
Okay.
I got some stickers from these guys. You can go down the Capsule website, or you can go down the rabbit hole that is social media. I would recommend hitting up Capsule at Capsule Skateboards, and you can get straight to their sales link. From there, you're able to actually purchase the board, get the size you want. They'll let you know when your board's done being made. These are made by hand. They are shaped by hand. And then once your little Ferrari board is done, they will ship it to you. Fair warning, the tracking numbers are terrible, but the board does make it to its destination every time. And if it doesn't, they will send you another one. These guys are honest. They do good work, and that's why I work with them. Little side note about Capsule, they also make longboards, cruisers, and custom-shaped decks.
I noticed when I was going on the website, I was like, oh, that's cool that they dab into custom shapes, longboards, and obviously the regular popsicle deck that we're all used to.
Yeah, I wonder how that would work. I haven't had one of their longboards yet, but something I've experienced just through skating for so long is harsh vibration. When you're rolling down a street, the feedback in your feet can make your feet numb.
Yeah.
And when you get to a spot, you can't really feel your flick too well. I notice I can feel my flick a lot better through here. It's almost like riding risers, sort of.
It's like risers without risers in a sense.
Yeah, shock pad would be a better way to describe it. The old shock pads?
Yeah, the Duke shock pads.
Yeah, kind of like that. It's just a little dulling to the feedback, but as far as my flick goes, it's perfect. And I wonder if longboarders would find that as good, because I feel like the deck would take a lot of that harsh vibration out that gets them into trouble.
Especially if you're going downhill like really fast with a longboard.
Yeah, I wouldn't know too much about it, but I would suspect that would be a better scenario.
I can imagine it does more good than harm.
With
that technology on a longboard.
Yeah, it is pretty unique. But as far as that, I mean, that was the future and the past.
It's crazy. Oh, one more thing before we go. You'll probably remember this because we used to sell a lot of them at the bomb shop. Do you remember the Yokoher aluminum decks?
Oh, Yoshire?
Yokoher is what they're called.
Oh, that's how they're actually pronounced?
Yeah, it's Yokoher.
I thought it was Yoshire.
No, it's Yokoher.
But yes, I had one of those aluminum decks. Those are hilarious. I'm so glad you brought this up.
Because I kept thinking like bomb shop tech decks. I'm like, wait a minute, we used to sell the Yokohers.
Yeah, I almost bought one a few months ago.
eBay?
No, OfferUp. There was a guy locally that had one. He wanted $40 for it. I was gonna go meet up with him, but I was really busy with the other stuff I do. But yeah, the Yokoher boards. So they had these plastic inserts in the tail you were supposed to be able to replace, but they were too far to the tail.
Yeah.
So the minute you started flicking around the board, it would bend the tip of the board in, and you could never replace them. Best part, it rattled like a rusty can.
No joke.
Dragging off your exhaust.
Yep.
Down the street. You could hear someone riding this board from 5 blocks away. My friends bring that up all the time when I'm hanging out with them. You remember when you had that metal board? We could hear you after you got out of your house. We could hear you throw your board down and start kicking your way over. And we knew 4 minutes later you'd be there.
What's funny is Robbie Yangon, he was the son of Big Bob who owned the shop. He rode it was just a regular gray metal board, and then they came out with a hot pink one. And I remember he had both of them. And as soon as you said that, like we'd be at the Braidwood skate park, you just hear that, like you said, that tin can just, I'm like, oh, Robbie's coming.
Yep.
That thing was loud as hell.
And you know what was sad about them? They weren't great.
No.
They were not great at all. They flattened out immediately.
No, I remember one day Robbie got pissed because he went to hit a board slide going down the pyramid at Braidwood, and that thing just, it didn't break. It dented. It not only did it dent, but I mean it didn't break like a traditional wood board. It dented, and then it had a crease, and I was like, "Oof, dude, there's no way in hell you can skate that deck." Because usually with a traditional wood deck, you can kind of get away with a cracked ply.
Yeah.
But I remember he tried to skate after that, and dude, like that completely changed the composition, the use of the board. I'm like, dude, you got to retire that deck. So. Great idea trying to make an aluminum deck. Bad concept because once it was done, it was done. I'm like I said, you could get away with maybe possibly skating a cracked ply.
Yeah, another funny thing you can do with those decks, and this is just from personal experience, you could actually, so they flattened out. Like they would literally, nose and tail would bend down slowly, and because there's no rebound in the deck, it wouldn't come back. But you could take them, stick them in a gutter cap, or in between a sewer grate.
Yeah.
And you could just bend the shape back into the deck. And it was hilarious, man. Other thing that was hilarious about him, so no matter what grind you actually did, it constantly sounded like you were doing like a crooked grind or a 50.
That's funny.
Because you do a board slide, metal sound.
Yeah.
You do a 50, metal sound. Tail slide, metal sound.
Deceiving, to say the least.
Yeah.
So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. This was definitely a different aspect to look at to look at the tack decks of the past and now the present. Again, I just want to thank you, Dylan, for coming on set and talking about Capsule, and again, the other brand that you were very close to, Revolution. Like I said, it's something. This was something different. This is something neat. So it's still on the history side of things, but it's not something that an everyday skater would think of. But if you're kind of like a skate rat or a skate nerd, or you're always thinking, how could I make sure I get the most longevity out of my stuff? Looking at tech decks isn't that it's going to cost you a little bit up front, but it's going to pay dividends in the long run. Yeah. So it was kind of cool that we could look at tech decks in this episode. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in, and look forward to bringing more bomb-ass content. Also, we are going to have a future Beyond the Board or Beyond the episode. We'll talk outside, and we'll figure out who we want to interview next as far as our up and coming skaters. And then also the next Beyond the Board is going to be about the high flying Brazilian himself, Bob Burnquist. You can see I posted up on both the Facebook and the Instagram. So we're going to definitely talk about Bob. And also, we talked about earlier, just a little bit earlier, how we mentioned, the whole street versus vert thing. We're really, really, I'll talk about a lot about, I'll mention, all the video clips and everything Bob did, but there's two particular things I want to talk about that we're going to look at in the Bob episode. So anyways, guys, I just want to say, thanks to Jerix, thanks to Skirt, and thanks to Pitbull for being with the channel. Like I said, there's this thing. The big things are going to happen. It's just going to take a while, and I look forward to bringing you guys, like I said, historical content, and then, like I said, bringing the up and coming talent in our area, getting the exposure that they rightfully deserve. Because we got some bomb ass kids, and even we got some bomb ass talent here. They just need the right exposure. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you later.